Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, our ongoing study in the very first church history by Eusebius. We're going to take a look at the end of chapter 3 and the beginning of chapter 4, pages 121 to 155. Let's begin with block 1. Let's take a look at the new bishops in the third year of Trajan's reign. Evarestus became bishop of Rome, and Justus became bishop of Jerusalem. Now, Ignatius of Antioch, he was a companion of Polycarp in Smyrna. Ignatius later was martyred by lions in Rome. He strongly supported the apostolic tradition, and he spoke out against emerging heresies. He wrote to Onesimus in Ephesus and Demas of Magnesia. He also wrote to Polybius of Tralles and to Rome itself. He said that his goal in life was to attain to Jesus Christ. And he also wrote, "I am the wheat of God, to be ground by the teeth of the beast," prior to his martyrdom. Now, Quadratus was the emerging evangelist after the apostles. He took up the work of evangelism, and he also provided a copy of the written Gospels wherever he preached. Then he appointed pastors, and he worked many wonders of the Spirit even after the apostolic age. But he did distribute written copies of the Gospels. Now, Clement of Rome, he wrote an epistle to the Corinthians. He quoted from Hebrews because he accepted Hebrews as apostolic. Some did challenge Hebrews, but he did accept it as Paul's apostolic letter. He fought strongly to preserve apostolic orthodoxy. Now, Papias of Asia Minor, he was a companion to Polycarp of Smyrna. He composed 5 books, related what he remembered from the elders. He also learned from John the presbyter, and that's key because that means there's a second significant John in Asia Minor that had some authority and some standing. So this John the presbyter, some believe that this second John wrote the book of Revelation, not John the apostle. There's split opinions on that, but some do say that this other John wrote the book of Revelation. I disagree with that because I see a corresponding theme between the Gospel of John and the book of Revelation, and that's the theme of New Exodus, and so I take up the position that John the Apostle wrote the book of Revelation. But there was another John in Asia Minor, John the presbyter. Now in block 2, we pick up in chapter 4, and we read that in Trajan's 18th year, another Jewish revolt broke out in Alexandria, where Lupus was governor of Egypt. The Jewish leader was Lucas. Marcius Turbo was the Roman leader that waged war against them. He also fought Jews in Mesopotamia. And because Marcus Turbo had defeated the revolt, he was appointed governor of Judea. Now under Hadrian, Quadratus, and Aristides, Hadrian succeeded Trajan as emperor. Quadratus addressed a Christian apologetic defense of Christianity to the new emperor. Aristides addressed a Christian apologetic defense to the emperor. Whenever a new emperor took the throne, Christian leaders tried to get the persecutions eased up or stopped. At this time, Alexander, bishop of Rome, died, and Zidus became bishop of Rome. And in Alexandria, Justus succeeded Primus as bishop. Now, the church at Jerusalem consisted entirely of Hebrew Christians. And here's a good little list for us. The order of the 15 bishops of Jerusalem from the beginning. And they went from James the Just to Simeon to Justus to Zacchaeus to Tobias to Benjamin to John to Matthias to Philip to Seneca to Justus to Levi, Ephraim, Joseph, and then Judas. Zidus was succeeded by Telesphorus as bishop of Rome. Eumenes became bishop of Alexandria. But we have the list of the Jerusalem bishops. I think that's a good list right there. We got the entire list of the Jerusalem bishops from beginning with James the Just. Now the Bar Kokhba revolt. When the Jewish revolt rose up again, Rufus was governor and received military assistance from the emperor. They killed thousands, including women and children, and confiscated their land. That's how cruel and brutal Rome was. I mean, women and children were massacred along with the men. The Jews were led by Bar Kokhba, meaning star. He claimed to be a luminary come down from heaven. The war reached its climax at the little town of Bethera, just outside Jerusalem. After the Jews were defeated, Hadrian, the emperor, decreed that the entire Jewish nation was forbidden to enter Jerusalem. Now Eusebius wants to look at the Gnostics. He says the devil sought to destroy the church from the inside through Gnosticism. Two heretics emerged, kind of proto-Gnostic teachers. Saturninus founded schools in Syria and Egypt. Basilius taught kind of a proto-mystery religion of proto-Gnosticism. And at this time, church leaders wrote treatises against heresy. Irenaeus wrote against the heresy of Gnosticism. Eventually, the Gnostics fragmented and disappeared. Orthodoxy won out over Gnosticism that was trying to split the church. Now, the writers during this time. Hegesippus wrote 5 books of apostolic teaching and against the imperial cult. Justin was a Christian philosopher who wrote against the imperial cult and against Bar Kokhba revolt. He praised the governor Granianus, who sought to stop persecution. Under bishops and heretics, Antonius Pius became emperor of Rome, succeeding Hadrian. Hyginus became bishop of Rome, and under Hyginus, the Marcion heresy emerged. Hyginus was convicted of false teaching and expelled from the Christian community. Marcion was a heretic. He said that the God of the Old Testament differed from the God of the New Testament. And he said that we should worship the unknown Father of the universe. Entirely a heretic, challenged by church leaders, and that is why Hyginus, the bishop of Rome at the time, was convicted of false teaching and expelled from the Christian community. So let's move on to block 3. Let's take a look at Polycarp, the bishop of Smyrna. He is remembered for telling Marcion. It's funny, but there was a story where Marcion says Marcion was really arrogant, and he looked at Polycarp and he said, "Don't you know who I am?" And Marcion said, "Yes, you are the firstborn of Satan." So Marcion was definitely challenged by the church leaders he was considered entirely false in his teaching. He wrote, Polycarp wrote an epistle to the Philippians that was very well known. He was instructed by John the Apostle. At the time, Marcus Aurelius became emperor, succeeding Pius. So under Marcus Aurelius as emperor, Asia fell under increased persecution. Christians were brought to the stadium of Smyrna for execution and entertainment for the masses. Germanicus pulled a lion toward himself to quicken his execution. And after this execution, the crowd, knowing of Polycarp and his prestigious place in the Christian community, they cried out for Polycarp to be brought to the stadium. And so when Polycarp was arrested and brought to the stadium, he was told, "Curse Christ and worship Caesar, and I will free you." Polycarp instead praised Christ, who had saved him. It was decided that he would be burned alive in the stadium for entertainment. Good old Rome. They were so cruel. But here's what happened. When the fire was lit, the flames shot upward, but curved outward away from Polycarp. None of the flames touched him. Finally, an executioner was ordered to just stab him and kill him because the flames would not touch him. They just kind of curved outward and formed this open space, and the flames never touched him. Now, Justin the Martyr. Justin was a Christian philosopher who continually defeated Crescens, the Cynic, in debate after debate. So, of course, Crescens, an arrogant and greedy philosopher, plotted against Justin to have him killed as a Christian. He was martyred under Pius, the emperor rule of Pius. So we get continuing look at this increased persecution of Christians in Asia. It continued to be an increased persecution, and we learned that Polycarp was very well recognized as the number 2 man after John the Apostle. I mean, he was like the first study under John the Apostle. And he was Bishop of Smyrna, but he was very well regarded, highly recognized as a great apostolic bishop and teacher. And destined for martyrdom, like most bishops were in that time. But they had their own arena in Smyrna. They didn't have to take them to Rome, because even the governor there practiced the horrors of the arena, and they had lions there, and they would feed Christians to the lions or brutally torture them in the arena or burn them, and they considered that entertainment for the masses. That's how sick they were, how perverted and cruel they were. So we get a look at the fact that even at the end of the first century, evangelism was picking up, and there was a very prominent evangelist, Quadratus, who also carried copies of the written Gospels. So the Gospels were getting distributed. The Holy Spirit was moving the church forward, and evangelists were emerging and spreading out copies, probably scrolls, probably not books at that time, but spreading copies of the Gospels, the 4 Gospels. And we learned that Christian leaders also would petition a new emperor. Anytime a new emperor would take the throne, the key church leaders would petition the emperor in writing to please stop the persecution of Christians, please recognize Christianity as an accepted religion. They would send basically a written Christian apologetic defending the faith. The Gnostics were emerging, we know that. We know that the Gnostics were prominent in Asia Minor, And they had to be challenged and put down. And John, the Apostle John, was very much against heresy and compromise to the faith. And Polycarp followed him in this, and they both vehemently challenged heresy, especially Gnosticism. And then Marcion. We learn about Marcion in this lesson. Marcion, who said that the Old Testament God differed from the New Testament God. Extreme heretic. So we get a lot of additional information that helps us fill in the ongoing changes in the line of bishops. In Jerusalem, they had many bishops, we saw in Block 2, that entire line of bishops, beginning with James the Just. That's going to wrap up pages 121 to 155. We're going to pick up in 156 in our next lesson.